So our friend Joseph essentially holds the keys to the kingdom, and he has the choice to either seek out a revenge-oriented form of justice or a love form of restoration with his brothers. Joseph somehow finds a way of opening wide those gates of love. I assume many of us are at least somewhat familiar with this story of Joe and his brothers. Today we just get a snapshot from the end portion of this great family saga. I recommend pulling out a copy of Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat if you need a bit of a refresher. It's a good way to spend a Sunday evening. But here's the quick synopsis of what has gone down in this family drama. Joseph is one of 12 sons of the father Israel. He's the second to the youngest. His father seems to have a bit of a favoritism towards Joseph. He gets a lot of special treatment. His brothers are not so impressed with this, so they bully him, almost leaving him for dead. But they decide, hey, hold up a second. We could either leave him for dead, or we could sell him off into slavery and make a few dollars out of it. So they choose to do the latter. Joe then spends over a decade in Egypt, first as a slave, then as a prisoner, and then somehow he makes his way to being Pharaoh's right-hand man. During a great famine, Joe's brothers come to Egypt seeking food for their large family clan. Joe recognizes them, but they don't recognize their brother. There's a lot of back and forth worthy of a daytime soap opera drama. Joe eventually has an opportunity to put one of his brothers into slavery. He could have taken this eye for an eye approach of retribution. But eventually, Joe reveals his identity. And instead of seeking revenge, Joe shows love by becoming the benefactor to the entire clan of Israel. Joe not only gives them gifts of food, but offers them a place to live and thrive within Egypt's borders until this long famine is over. See, side note is Joe likes to interpret dreams and knows from that this famine is going to be for 7 years, and they're only 2 years into it. So simply giving them some food would not be enough. The final actions of Joseph shows us what it means to love thy enemy. I'm pretty sure if someone went and tried to sell me into slavery, they would be at the top of my enemy list. I wonder what in all of this changes Joe's mind and heart. Was it that he could see the bigger picture, that even though emotionally he probably still didn't care very much for his brothers, besides little Ben anyway? Was there some way that he knew that so many other people depended on this clan that it was worth overlooking his feelings? I also wonder if being away from the family for about 13 years at this point gave him enough time to think and sit about it all, to realize that while the brothers were not justified in their actions, their attitudes of dislike probably did not come out of nowhere. Joe drew an unfamiliar amount of attention from his father. I mean, think about that coat of many colors. And then showing off those dream interpretation skills probably got a bit annoying after a while. However he managed to get there, Joe shows us that love thy enemy is possible. So both this Genesis drama and the teaching from Jesus today helps us to see what love is and what love is not. Love is the key by which the gates of God's kingdom are realized, our experience not only in ourselves, but in the world that interacts with us. Love is not just some warm, fuzzy feeling in here. Love is action. Sometimes it even takes faking it till we make it, when our heart and emotions haven't yet quite caught up. When we decide to act out of a place of love, even if we don't yet feel it in here. Love is how we treat one another. Our baptismal vow says, respect the dignity of every human being. Or as our friends in parts of Asia would say, namaskar or namaste, meaning the divine in me sees the divine in you. Even if I don't really like you right now, I'm going to focus on that godly thumbprint that is on you. And that is what's going to lead me to show acts of kindness and love. Jesus says love is not tit for tat. It's not show me love and I'll show you love in return, which has this unspoken implication, show me grief and I'll show you grief in return. Love is not what will I get out of this, nor is it primarily worried with the ramifications of such an action. Love is not concerned about the response. And yet, Jesus also tells us that love is not being a doormat. Love is not turning a blind eye to injustice. Love is not letting abuse and suffering continue on. Turn the other cheek does not mean passively just letting someone continue to beat up on you mercilessly. There's greater nuances in Jesus' words here. To explain that, I'm going to invite a friend up. Friend? Friend, I'm mad at you. What are you going to do? She turned the other cheek. She must be reading the gospel. Now, when she turns her cheek, I have two options, right? I can either now slap her with my left hand, which first off is not my dominant hand, so it's not really going to have the woof that I want it to be. But in ancient days, similar to Asia today, there's no toilet paper. Your left hand is for something else unmentionable, which is why it is not used for engagement with other people. So if I were to use my left hand, I would be the one who gets shamed because I was doing something completely taboo. So left hand is out, not an option. So now, what do I have left? All I can do is backslap her, right? Which in that case, A, again, is not going to have much power. B, it is meant, backslapping someone was only really meant for those who were women or slaves or children. And so if we're actually in equal relationship, and now I'm doing something that was meant for what people back then would see as less than, not today, that's not, the real view, right? But all of a sudden, I'm challenging our relationship. And again, who is going to be generally shamed from that? Not you, me. So the one who is the aggressor is now being put in her place. So that's the first one. Second is that Jesus says if someone takes your coat, give them your shirt also. A little bit of nuance here that is important to understand. It's not that Debbie here is walking down the street and I'm like, hey, that's a nice coat, I want it, I'm going to take it from you. That's not what's going on here. People don't just randomly steal coats off of other people, right? If Debbie is in great debt, which was rather common in the time because of this very dysfunctional Roman occupation, if Debbie was in debt, the middleman or woman would take her to debtor's court. We're going to debtor's court. Ready?
Ready?
Hey, you owe me money. Are you going to pay?
No.
Say yes.
Yes.
How do I know you're going to pay? You know what? I need collateral. Give me your coat.
Well, if you're taking that coat, you might as well have this one too.
I love you. You can go away if you want. Thank you, Debbie. So, back in the day, if someone were to take off their second garment, their shirt, they probably wouldn't be having a nice pink bikini underneath. There would have been nothing. They would have been leaving court completely in the buff. That would have been taboo, but not as much on the person leaving naked as the person causing the nakedness. Again, it's taking a stand against the injustice of that situation. It's saying, I'm not going to fight back. I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to, be aggressive about this, but I am going to call out the injustice. Matthew's version of this says over and over again, resist evil. Resist in Greek literally means to stand against. It's not fight or flight. There's a third option here, and that is to stand against the evil while still seeing somehow the fingerprint of God in that person. As Walter Wink says it, evil can be opposed without being mirrored. That's what love is. Finding ways to seek peace and shalom, to resist evil by not becoming evil ourselves. Another theologian says, grace does not excuse evil, but it releases the claim of retribution and opens the gates of reconciliation so that relationships can be restored. I believe this is echoed in the story of Joseph and his brothers. There's definitely a sense of accountability in this narrative that we read today. First, notice that how Joseph reveals his identity. He says, I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into slavery. He doesn't skip that part. He doesn't say, oh, bygones be bygones. He acknowledges the wrong that had been done to him. And then, in that little bit that we skip over, if you look at the readings, you see we skipped a couple of verses. Part of that was the instructions that Joseph then gives to his brothers. He says, you must tell my father how greatly I am honored in Egypt. To do that means to admit that Joseph is still alive. The brothers had told Israel a long time ago that Joe had died. And so now they have to take accountability for their actions, to acknowledge and admit that they had lied. They're not getting away scot-free. There's accountability that needs to happen alongside reconciliation. Even though with this sense of a third way, not doing fight or flight, there still is the reality that love thy enemy is not easy. Some people do some pretty awful things that make this pretty challenging. I own it. One last inspirational word that I hope helps us to keep this as a priority in how we act and behave comes from a theologian and good friend of mine, Jason Porterfield, as he writes, the reason why Jesus solely used the title Child of the Most High for those who love their enemies is because they are the ones who most fully resemble the forgiving Father. If you go about making peace and loving your enemies, then everyone will know you're a child of God because you're in the spitting image of your Father. People will look at you and say, "Wow, you remind me of your dad. You look and act just like him." Isn't that what we want people to say about us? That we resemble our Heavenly Father? Challenge accepted. Jesus is ushering in a new way of doing life. Jesus is showing us ways towards shalom. But Jesus also acknowledges that this now and not yet time that we are in means that evil still exists. There is still brokenness. And our call in this season is to resist or to stand against evil in our own actions and to hold other evil actions accountable so that shalom can be experienced. For we are all God's beloved. We are the gates of God's kingdom, either holding people back from experiencing God's love and peace, or becoming the portals through which God's kingdom is actualized, is experienced. There's a Taizé song I think we're rather familiar with. I think we sing it once in a while here at this service. The second line is this: "Open in us the gates of your kingdom." Recently, it occurred to me, even though I've been singing this song for decades, it's not open to us, the gates of your kingdom. It is open in us, the gates of your kingdom. Gates control flow, either keeping people out or welcoming them in. My prayer for us is that we continue to be gates always open, so that God's kingdom, so that God's love can be known. Amen.